Shenika, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. It'll be a nice, quiet Sunday, I hope.
Absolutely.
Live
We're
on
live, everyone.
Facebook.
We are. Yay. Fun it. All right, everyone, welcome. I will preface this by saying my internet is not the greatest, so if it freezes, my esteemed guest will just keep talking and I will be frozen. But it happens. So
It does.
welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us on Facebook today. This town hall is going to be a little bit different than our previous ones because the situation really warrants it. I won't be doing my typical, campaign update, COVID-19 update, capital update. But if you have questions about that, just reach out to me afterwards and we'll get those answers for you. So on Monday, May 25th, Memorial Day, George Floyd, a 46-year-old father in Minneapolis, was murdered by a Minneapolis police officer while 3 other Minneapolis police officers stood by or assisted. Mr. Floyd's tragic murder has gripped Minnesota, our nation, and the world. We are all collectively being told to wake up and pay attention, to do something. And many of you may be wondering why I didn't come out with a process and a 12-step plan to fix systemic racism and end police brutality, or why our campaign has only been posting messages and content from the people of color and Indigenous caucus at the legislature or local activists rather than original content. I firmly believe that for a white suburban candidate, right now is not the time to speak. Now is not the time for politicians to see this as an opportunity for press recognition. Now is not the time to stand here and shed tears for the world to notice. Now is the time we need to listen. There are folks who have been leading on these issues for many years. Activists, community members, friends, neighbors who have been on the front lines of this fight for decades. Governor Walz said, the last thing we need right now is another white politician trying to lead the way. And I agree. I constantly talk about building coalitions and bringing experts to the table so that I can make the best decision as someone who's elected to represent you. Right now, the best way for me to lead is by taking a step aside, by elevating the voices that Minnesota needs to hear and be ready to be an ally when I'm asked. Which leads me to our 2 guests today, who I am truly humbled and grateful to have joining us, both of whom are Chaska residents. We've got Shanika Chambers. She's an author, advocate, and activist. And Dante Hughes is a father, activist, motivational speaker, and a candidate for the Eastern Carver County School Board. So welcome to both of you. Thanks so much for joining us here. We'll start with some introductions, who you are, how long you've lived in Carver County, anything else you'd like to tell us. And then we'll go to some questions. We do have some to get us started, but for those of you watching on Facebook, please leave your comments, type your questions in the comments on Facebook, and I will transfer those over to the Zoom call that we're on, and we can get those answered. There's a little bit of a delay, but we can get that done. And I will say that both of our guests do want you to ask the tough questions, so don't be nervous to ask anything. All right, so
Absolutely.
Shanika, let's start with you.
My name is Shenika. I became involved with just community organizing because I really wanted to see more people of color in this area. And currently I'm a student at Metropolitan State University, working on my graduate's degree. I'm assisting Addie with her campaign, and I'm also working with the caucus as a candidate services associate. And you, Dontá?
My turn. My name is Dante Hughes. I have been living in Chaska for 8 years now, and I publicly speak at school board meetings or wherever I'm asked. I am running for District 112 school board this year because I feel like there is a perspective and a voice that I have that can speak to a lot of things that happen in the community and inside of the schools. And I also believe that I have a perspective that can help make it better. I'm a 37-year-old father, married father of 5, and I'll be 36 this year on June 21st. So I was supposed to have a barbecue this year, but because of COVID, I decided not to, because I just did not want to have a group and put everyone in harm's way. And thank you, Addie, for asking me to do this. I absolutely appreciate it.
Well, I'm really glad both of you could be here. This is not something that I need to be doing on my own. So thank you both. We really appreciate every ounce of wisdom we can get from you guys. So, so let's start with the first question right off the bat. Does racism or bias exist in Carver County, and what's your experience with that?
For me, I would say that, yeah, racism and bias does exist within Carver County. And not only does it exist here, but it exists all across our state and as well as our country. I think that many folks like to believe that these things have left our society in some sort of way.
Okay, I'm not sure who's frozen.
There we go. I'm back now. Sorry.
All right.
We need state broadband. We need statewide broadband. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
Get Comcast. Get Comcast.
Yeah.
Yes. So yes, racism does exist within Chaska. And my experiences, I would say, within racism, I would say would be the first time like I went to school in Chaska. I came to Chaska when I was 9 years old. So I'm 26 now. I've almost been here for about 17 years. And on my very first day of school, a group of men drove up to my mother and my older brothers as she was dropping us off at school and called us the N-word. And that was my first experience kind of like dealing with race. It's my first experience hearing the N-word, being called that. My mother had to sit us down and talk with us about that. But I think it was just the start of more incidents. Another incident I can recall is my brother, who was a part of a hip hop group at the time around 2005 and 2007. Chaska High School had a hip hop club. So students would come and they would do, I don't know, Addie, if you recall.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit.
They would come and kids would do hip hop and break dancing. And there was a talent show. And a lot of the students who were in this club were students of color. But during the talent show, the students decided to dress up in pink as like a way to show unity. And mind you, this was like a fashion statement that lots of men were doing at the time, but this was something that they had decided to do. My brother did 2 hours within his school day before they sent him home. Chaska police sent him home and accused him and all of the other minority students of being in the Valentine gang, whatever gang that was. But they accused them of being in a gang. And I think that that says something to the fact that our students are hyper criminalized and they are put in situations that put them at risk in the long run.
Definitely. Dante, what about you?
Well, racism and bias definitely exists inside of our community. And for me, it's been shown in a number of ways, and with the things that's gone on, like inside of the high schools and on social media, we can see those conversations happen with people displaying their racism, even with the referendum that we were trying to get passed here in November. You could see how openly racist that some of the people were that's not from Carver County that were allowed to come here and spread lies and try to do anything that they could to get the referendum to fail, even though that referendum had nothing to do with them, absolutely nothing to do with them. It wouldn't have bothered their taxes, not one bit. But that group of people hate referendums, and they'll go wherever they want, wherever they can to get a referendum to fail, and don't care what the consequences of that is. And with the conversations about the racist things that has gone on, on Facebook, you have people that lives in Carver County that defends those things, and it's not right. It's not right at all. And the thing about bias, everybody has biases. Every single person has bias in them, and we need to exploit those biases on our own, for ourselves, for our own growth. And I mean, bias is so widespread, but it's a shame when it comes out and you can see it on social media and people won't even stop to recognize their own biases. So it both of them definitely exist, like, in our community. I've been working on Facebook to try to help people to understand, from my point of view. Sometimes I try to make it personal. Like I asked the question on my Facebook, what if I were George Floyd? Like, what if that happened to me? How would people feel? And I really wanted to know what people thought and how that made them feel. And sometimes I just speak my thoughts on it. And this month, and hopefully for the next months continuing forward, we are going to be electing a Carver County Community Member of the Month. So, yeah. But yeah, it does. Bias and racism definitely exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember coming back from Illinois and hearing the incidences of blackface in Chaska High School and being shocked and thinking like, well, that didn't happen when I was there. I don't know what's going on. And someone told me, literally said to me, I don't know what Chaska you went to, because the one I went to, that happened. And I just felt so disgusted with myself that I didn't see it and that I didn't do anything about it. I think that exists in a lot of folks here, and we have to be okay with knowing that and being able to tackle that and deal with it. So.
Yeah, that being able to recognize it and deal with it is part of the hard work, which people don't want to do. It's easier to point blame and point fingers. And that's one reason why I absolutely love Roar, because I knew not one person that's a part of Roar before it started, but we were seeing each other inside of the school board meetings and hearing everyone's story. And we were shocked that we didn't know of each other's stories and how like secretive it was, but it had been going back for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for those of you guys that are not aware of ROAR, that's ROAR, that's Residents Organizing Against Racism. Extremely necessary and helpful and amazing organization. If you guys want contacts, let me know. I will hook you guys up. So, all right, let's move on to the next question here. There are studies that say that Minnesota is the best state in the nation to raise a small family or raise a family. And there are, at the same time, studies that say that Minnesota is one of the worst in the nation for Black people to live, in healthcare disparities, wealth, education disparities, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on those studies? Are those accurate, and why or why not? Shenika, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would like to think that those studies are accurate. I believe that Minnesota is a great state, but the studies are correct. And as great of a state that Minnesota is, and how proud I am to say that I am from here, I think that we should all be honest with ourselves. That the conditions for Black people may not be bad, I think, across the whole country, in Minnesota compared to the whole country, I would say. But when you think about just the disparities that we have, like the poverty levels here, those are very, very wide. I believe that the poverty level for white individuals who are in Minnesota is at 7%, while for Black people, it's at 30 to 35%. I think 32%. So those numbers are very alarming, and they let you know that, yeah, these studies are very accurate. They're very true. And there are some disparities for African Americans and Black people who are in America, particularly Minnesota. And we need to do more to address those things in this great state that we have.
Do you want to add?
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So coming from Chicago, I have seen, I grew up with Black people at first. And then coming to Minnesota, even in North Minneapolis, when we first moved, I couldn't believe how diverse the communities were. So I thought, like, this is an awesome place to be. And then the school systems were much better, but the farther you go out of the inner city, the better the school systems are. And we know that personally because my kids went to Wise Charter School in North Minneapolis. And then when we came here to Chaska, they went to Chaska Elementary while it was still operating. And the work here, it really challenged the kids. So we appreciated that because they wasn't getting that challenge in North Minneapolis. Minnesota is by far in its own ways better than where we've come from in Chicago. But it also has its share of problems, which are huge. with racism being, so close to the top, especially the farther you get out of the inner city. I don't understand it because that's just not how I am. So I'm not capable of understanding why someone would be racism. What is so scary about another person that you are racist? And as far as the health and everything goes, I was having a conversation with another guy, and he was telling me about um, the numbers with Black women and white women, the differences of a Black woman dying during childbirth and the differences between white women, and that the differences are so huge because there are doctors that does not equate a pregnant woman's pain the same across the board. So if my wife was complaining about pregnancy pains or labor pains, they would be looked at far less serious as if she was a white woman. And I don't know those numbers for sure, but I've always heard about the disparities with healthcare and Black women and Black families and white families. Me, I have asthma, so whenever I'm in a hospital, I'm usually seen right away. But because of asthma attacks, that's very severe. So I think Minnesota is a great place and also a very scary place for Black people to live.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I've been really fortunate to learn from my good friend Representative Cully Herr, who represents St. Paul, is every piece of legislation has to be looked at through an equity lens. It has to take in considerations, regardless of if it's education or healthcare or what it might be. So I appreciate that. Thank you. We got a really good question I want to put it out here. Sally asked, do you miss not having a large Black community out here in Carver County? I've read in past years about families that moved out here and then moved back to the city because they felt isolated.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Shenika.
I would say I've never known Chaska to really have a large population of Black people, but I would know Chaska of having a population of Black people who do leave and who do not want to come back. I've been in Chaska since I was 9 years old. I'm 26 now, and I love Chaska. Chaska is a really great place for me. I like all of the different opportunities that Chaska has been able to afford to me. However, not being able to be around individuals who look like me or understand me, and then also having to deal with racial issues on top of that from folks who just don't want you in their community or who have expressed that, it can be very, very discouraging for individuals who are of color, who are Black, who live out here. The Black friends that I did have who lived in Chaska growing up, they no longer live here. Their families are not here. And I think that says a lot about how they were welcomed or not so much welcomed within the community. So yeah, I would say I do miss the Black community that was here. But I would say it's nice to see that there are people of color who are here now, and who are just really just trying to fight for a place to call their home, to feel accepted. I think it's beautiful seeing the people of color that we do have here now.
And I agree with Shenika. Yes, well, I was born and raised in, Black communities. So I absolutely missed it because of that alone. And the fact that Chicago is so huge and it's not as big here, I can tell like how much it slows down, and I can just see a lot of difference between it. But if I go to a restaurant or a store in North Minneapolis or in Chicago, I can feel a little bit more comfort than when I do in Chaska. But that's because that's where I've grown up. And of course, yeah, I do. I miss it. But I would also rather my kids grow up here in Chaska and learn and deal with racism than to learn and deal with the things that I had to learn and grow up with in Chicago. So I would definitely choose this over where I come from. But yeah, I do. I love it and I miss it, but now Chaska is home for us.
Dante, you can decline to answer this if you want, but you told me a story the other day about something that you had to teach. And it struck me that my dad has never had to teach my brother that. So I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Which part? Because I have two sons, so there's a lot that I have to teach them. I have to teach them, you know, to be themselves. You know, I don't believe in living in fear. So no matter what, I have to teach them to also not live in fear. And even though I know that small situations can turn really huge for them and be life or death situations for them, I have to teach my sons to be themselves no matter what. Because I feel when you're not being yourself and you're not doing things because of fear, it takes away some of that authentic person that you're trying to be. And to me, being authentic is the best thing you can give anyone else. So teaching my sons that, but also making them very aware of the situations that they'll come into that can be super life threatening for them. It's heartbreaking, it's upsetting. And yeah, a lot of other families don't have to go through this. They don't have to worry about it. They don't have to speak up for my kids. And that's what I want my kids to always be able to do, no matter how uncomfortable they are. I want them to always be able to use their voices and speak up for themselves. And honestly, I will teach my kids that if your life is in danger, you fight for it. I don't care who it is or what you're going against. If you feel like your life is about to be taken away from you, you fight for every inch and piece of your life.
Thank you for sharing that. That's just, we've never had those conversations in my house. I mean, we grew up in Victoria and we never had to have conversations like this. So the fact that this has to happen in 2020 in Carver County, that's just unacceptable. So the next question is, thank you for sharing that. The next question is, what are some things that are currently being done to eliminate racism or educate people on biases, and how can we join? How is it going? Is it enough? I don't know who wants to take that one first.
Yeah.
I'll let Shenika go.
Yeah, I would say one thing for sure that we're doing in order to eliminate racism and bias within our communities are just simply having these discussions and not denying that these issues exist. Like I said earlier, I think that when we deny that our community does have these issues and has had these issues for a very long time now, we're just putting a band-aid over a lot of people's pain, and we're invalidating them. So having that conversation and us being open about what's going on and just having people who will listen. I think the most important part of being an ally is just listening and being willing to educate yourself. And also being willing to check the thoughts and the ideologies of your white peers and your white family members who are continuing with, an older way of thinking about things. I think that yeah, so just beginning to, if we want to eliminate racism and bias, I think we need to continue to have these conversations. And we also need people who are within leadership positions like you, Addie, to hold space for these conversations to happen too. But that's what I would say. What about you, Dante?
I agree. With out here in Chaska and Carver County, a few things that have been done. We do have Roar, and that is so endearing for a lot of people that felt like they didn't have a voice or they didn't have anybody that could help speak to the issues that they were having. And then also, I'm starting to have conversations with community members. And within the last 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, I've had more friend requests and Facebook messages than I've had in a long time. I think we're getting more people that is starting to realize that something's wrong and that they have a say in how we fix these things. So they're asking questions now, and I'm talking to each and every person that asks to talk, to meet. And another thing that goes with like fighting racism or bringing truth to light, like Shanika said, to talk to your peers. One thing I'll say is it's less harmful when you start those conversations with your family and your friends, because if it turns into a big argument, you guys will talk and figure things out the next day once everything cools down. But when you're in a community and you're public, that opens up the door of harm so much more. And, we don't know how deep that harm can go. And for us, like Black people, and this is my own thought, but I think we also need to create the space for white people to ask those questions, those hard questions, those difficult questions, and questions that they are afraid to ask. Because, I know how it looks when a question is not asked right, and the looks or, the comments that you'll get behind it. But if we're trying to change things, we have to give everybody a space to be able to communicate, be able to ask questions, and have those questions answered.
Which is a great reminder that if anyone has questions, please put them in the comments on Facebook. We will get those answered for you too. So what does it mean to be an ally? Like, what is needed from, people like me or elected officials or your friends and neighbors? What does that mean? What does that look like to be an ally?
I think that being an ally really involves an incredible amount of not only listening, but hearing people. Allyship it's a lifelong process of continual education. I feel like white allies who stand against racial injustices, they understand that their knowledge of a person's experience may be limited, but with that limitation, they don't let that stop them from taking a stand against something, particularly racial injustices. So I think that for those who are in elected positions, as well as those within the general public, it's not only needed, but necessary that we focus on building relationships with people of color, along with other white folks, in order to challenge them in the ways that they're thinking about race, in the ways that they're teaching their family and friends and other folks to think about race as well.
Yes. I love what you said about, teaching and raising kids, because sometimes as parents, we don't realize how much kids are listening. And part of teaching as a parent is when you're having conversations that you feel like your kids aren't even listening to and they're paying very close attention. An ally for me is it's a lot of what Shenika said. Those conversations are key, and not being afraid to also speak your voice to someone who doesn't feel the same way as you. But an ally is also like if you have a friend and you see them in trouble or in need, it's also coming to their rescue. And I believe once you have an ally, that goes both ways. So everything that we ask of allies, we have to be able to provide that to them as well. Because having an ally can't be just one person being an ally. It has to be both sides. The conversations, the active listening is key. Because that active listening will allow you to let whoever you're talking to know that you're listening to them without interrupting what they're saying or jumping in the conversation or stopping them from talking. And I think that will be a very huge part, because you'll understand and hear some of the anger and the pain behind our voices, even if it's just a simple conversation.
So just to kind of piggyback off that, we see a lot of kind of these Marnita's Table events and National Night Out and community building events. Do you think we need more of those? Do you think those are helpful?
Yeah, Addie, I think those things like that are helpful, but I think us having deliberate attempts to reach out to communities of color within our community of Chaska is a really great way of kind of starting to build that relationship. I think that Marnita's Table does a really great job at doing some of that, but I think we need deliberate attempts where we are saying that we need to reach out, we need to bring folks together, and we need to just celebrate our differences instead of, push folks away. I think those are things that we can begin to do.
I absolutely love Marnita's Table. Absolutely.
Me too.
I adore the way that she does things, and not only that she does it for a community, and then she's here and then she's gone, because she offers training to people that want to be able to hold their own izzies. Izzies is what they call the meetings and the feasts, and the food is so good, and but she intentionally forces people to talk to somebody that does not look like them. And I have never seen an event hosted by Marnita's Table that turned out to be extremely uncomfortable or not welcoming. It may be uncomfortable sometimes. It might be uncomfortable, but it's very much needed. And I've been to 2 of Marnita's Table's training, because I would love to be able to do something like that inside of the community here. And I think that sets up a really good way for the community to get out and see their neighbors that they don't see consistently or even at all. And it also gives that chance to be able to ask those hard questions from people that they have never talked to before and get an answer, and then eat food that they may not normally eat, which is, I love food.
I support that. Yeah. So we just got a great question too on the Facebook. Do you feel, or did you feel rather, did you feel the need to not be seen around Chaska when some of the stores chose to board up their windows in anticipation of rioting?
Shenika?
Yeah, I would say not that I felt like I didn't want to be seen, but I was very so aware of who I was and where I was. Sorry. Particularly, particularly within the past 2 weeks, I was telling Addie and Dante recently on Thursday, just the environment and the nature that we are in right now, and just where people's heads are at. But yeah, recently driving, I've had issues just with people yelling homophobic and racial slurs at me. And that's very daunting. And within Carver County or Shakopee, this happened. So things like that, I wasn't so much, not wanting to be seen because of, what businesses might have thought if I, because I'm Black, if they might have wanted to board up their businesses because of that. It was more so just like, I was scared for my own safety being in Carver County when all of this stuff started to happen, just because of the statements that I had been hearing, the incident that happened to me on Thursday. Not so much about the businesses. I feel like I understand that businesses want to protect their property, who would not. I think it's just the people within this community that really kind of made me not want to come out. So yeah, what about you, Dante?
So one thing that drives me a little crazy, not much, a little crazy, because people don't know what type of stereotype that they're putting on me and my kids and my family and my Black friends. Because when you start to board up those businesses, I understand that you want to protect your business, but you also perpetuate the stereotype that I am going to come over there and tear up your business. Not even if you mean it to point it at me, but that's the way that people are going to see it. To see it as if I may be one of those people that may just go in and burn it down or loot it. So it's very disheartening when I see people do that, especially when there is no real threat that something is coming here. And that was part of the reason why I told people on Facebook that if we had a protest, then I would patrol our community. And, I did that and had to be at work at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I took a couple of pictures of downtown square and Target, because Target seemed to be the most topic of the conversations of looting and rioting. So I wanted to take a picture and let people know that I stopped by there. I held up to my word, and then I went to work after that. But we can't let fear drive us, because fear, when you do things out of fear, you stop your life from living. And then also depending on what that fear is, you may just be putting some pressure on someone else, like me and my family and other Black families that are going into Target now. And who knows who's looking at us like, are they here for whatever reason?
Mm-hmm. And part of that protest got moved online, and I think all three of us, or maybe a few of us, were watching that online roar kind of vigil, and it was beautiful. It was run by a couple community members here, and I just want to highlight one story that was told. A woman, a local community member here, had her kids process George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery's death by doing art. And she had her sons come on and show the art. And one of the kids held up a picture and said, "This is Ahmaud." And he has a circle of protection around him. And her son said, "I wish that he was a superhero so he could have turned invisible when the bad guys come." And that shatters my heart, that anyone in our community would have to deal with that and think like that. So we've talked a lot about the Posse Caucus is the POCI, that's People of Color and Indigenous Caucus at the legislature. And they have been leading the way in coming up with all kinds of really creative solutions to tackle these issues. A lot of it right now is, of course, focused on police reform, but I know they've led the way in educational and healthcare disparities and that kind of reform too. So kind of leading into that question, what are some legislative efforts that you would like to see Carver County elected officials support, or even, bring on their own? I don't know who wants to take that one first.
Yeah, I think that Representative Carlos Mariani and the Posse Caucus, they've really come up with a lot of great ideas and legislative efforts in order to fight this issue. I think one idea was to raise the standard of conduct of our policing institutions. And that is to just basically raise, the standard of morality. What does it mean to be an officer? What are the positions or of moral that you should be acting on? And if we can do something like that, I think that we could change a lot of officers who don't act or who refuse to act when they are in opportunities where people are abusing their power. I think another idea is to have a police force that resembles the community that it's serving. Something that I don't believe is being done in Carver County. I think we have two people of color who are on our police force, but we have a police force of over 30 folks and none of them are Black. And I believe only 2 of them are Hispanic. So I think that there are areas that we can improve on within our own community in Carver County, legislatively as well.
So let me first say that my points of view are my points of view, so do not link them to anyone else's. But I feel like this absolutely needs to be said. When George Floyd first happened, I was disappointed with Chaska officials because I don't feel like anything was being done. I know there have been police statements, but they weren't when things started to happen. They didn't speak against the riots, or they didn't speak up for the protests in a way that the community can hear it at large, because the right to protest, as you can see, it was taken out of context because of rioters, but no one really spoke out about, we were going to protect our community. And I also had a problem because the protest that we did was peaceful. We weren't loud, we weren't yelling at anyone. We were not carrying guns to a protest. And the reactions between two separate protests, the peaceful protest that we were planning to do here had more negative reactions than a protest with 100 plus people with guns. So I would like our city officials, especially here in Carver County, to openly, at the beginning, don't wait, to start talking about things. And if riots start to happen other places, we need the outside community to know that not only our police or our city elected officials, but also our community will keep our community safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So a couple things in the comments here I just want to share with you guys. Jay said, people fear the unknown. We need to meet each other to understand each other. Fully agree with that. And have a funny story about that, actually. I was door knocking. I can't remember which city it was in. And I met a gentleman who was very anti-Somali people and having Somali people settle out here. And I brought my friend back like 2 weeks later, and we sat and talked with him for a little bit. It was great. And then my friend left, and I said, well, that gentleman was Somali. And the guy, like, it blew his mind. And that little things like that, little conversations, but head on is how I think we can help change this.
I agree. Those conversations and relationships definitely need to happen so that we can help each other with our biases, and also not be so rigid in the thought process of stereotypes.
All right, one other question on the comments here. Nancy, I am a part of a faith community. Our church has tried to be multiracial and has been unsuccessful. From your perspective, can this work? Or does it end up being a burden to be a few among many white people? If that makes sense.
Shenika, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I would say it's important for us to ask this question, or at least for a group or a Christian or your faith group to kind of ask this question on like a personal basis, and maybe ask what are the things that we could be doing to really reach out to that community to pull them in, as opposed to just being here and wanting people to come in. I don't think that it's a burden for Black people or for people of color to be in a church or a faith group with people who may not look like them. I can say that personally, I think that it's more comfortable to be in a faith group where people may look like you. But I think it's also really important that faith groups here in Chaska, like, we are reaching out to those groups of people and really making it a priority to make people feel comfortable and make people want to be in that environment. But I don't think that it's a burden to be among the few people of color or multicultural people at a white faith group. But yeah, I think that, these are also historical issues too, and just how comfortable African Americans are, Black people are going to a predominantly white church. And those are things that we have to also break down and talk about too.
I think it going to a white church or a predominantly white church, and I'll say this from experience. When my wife and I and the kids, we moved just to Minnesota, and we were living in Brooklyn Center, we were trying different churches to, find a good fit. And we were in predominantly white churches most of the time, and there was a level of being uncomfortable there. For one thing we weren't used to, like going to church back home, is a separate place for the kids. So when we sat down, there was a lady that came over and was like, well, we can take the kids. We have a different place where the kids go. And we were like, no, no, you're not taking our kids. And we didn't really expect anything. We just weren't familiar with that part. So it was kind of scary for us that somebody would offer to uh, take the kids somewhere and not really explain to us like where the kids are going. So I noticed a lot of churches do that here now. But I think for us, well, on my part, I stopped going to church a while ago because I started to see the hypocrisy in church than what I was reading in the Bible. And one of my grandmothers, she told me it doesn't matter where you are. um, you can have church anywhere. Church can be anywhere. It doesn't mean that the only place to go to church is to be inside of her church. You make your church wherever you are. So I decided to stop going to church, and I have always stayed inside of my Bible and read it and processed it and used my interpretation of what I thought it meant, other than to continue to go to church and see so many hypocrite things being said, or the thoughts. And I think politics need to separate from religion 110%, because I never learned how to be anything political through church. And, people use that for an agenda or a narrative now. And I don't think that that's right to the religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, separation of church and state. I'm all for it as well. So we're getting a lot of comments thanking us, thanking you all for sharing. Jennifer defined ISI as intentional social interactions from the Mojitos Table event. So love that. All right. One question I really, really wanted to discuss today, because I feel very passionately about it, is why is all lives matter a harmful narrative? So when we say Black Lives Matter, what does that actually mean? And why is all lives matter not an okay response? I don't know who wants to take that one first.
I can take it. I would say that all lives matter is a harmful narrative, because we all know that all lives matter, and I don't think that anyone disagrees that all lives do matter. However, all lives are not being subjected to racial discrimination. Black lives are. So I feel like we know that white people are being killed by the police. However, they're not being killed by police at the same rate. Um, I feel like recently I saw an example. It was a picture, like a cartoon ad in the newspaper. And a person asked in the cartoon ad, why is it Black Lives Matter? Why can't we say all lives matter? And the way the person kind of explained it was through an analogy of, if we have a house that's on fire on one street, the fire people, the firemen and firefighters, firewomen, are going to come and they're only going to blow out that one house. They're not going to come and give water to every single house, because every single house is not on fire. Only that one house is on fire. And that's to say that only Black lives are being targeted by racial discrimination at ridiculous rates, than others. So to say that all lives matter is, again, to just invalidate the fact that these things are happening. It's denying that all of these things are happening. And yeah, I highly disagree with it. I feel very passionately about that too. But my main argument is that no, we don't feel that all lives don't matter. We actually believe that they do, but Black lives matter, or Black lives are incoherently and just ridiculously being targeted by the police, at astronomical rates. And not just police brutality, but like we stated earlier, there's health issues, wealth issues, educational disparities, and all of these things that play a role into why we're screaming and asking for people to hear us and to listen when we're saying Black Lives Matter.
And I agree, Shenika. It it's harmful because saying all lives matter is a deflection. You will only hear that when someone is arguing that Black lives matter, and that in itself lets you know that all lives does not matter. Um, because if all lives matter, then Black people wouldn't be treated like their life does not. And we can see that consistently in a number of ways that Black lives doesn't matter. We had an incident in Chaska where a lady had a bad she had a bad incident at Dunkin' Donuts, and the community was saying, "Oh, those kids should be fired. They shouldn't do this. They shouldn't do that." And then we had the TikTok video with the blackface, and people were like, "Oh, well, they're just kids. Their minds not fully developed." And you can see the difference of conversations between those two events, and not even the same consideration for a group of kids from one video to the next. So Black Lives Matter, well, all lives matter is like a slap in the face to Black people because no one feels like our lives matter as much. And then also to be able to say all lives matter when we can consistently see how Black people are treated, it's just someone that's afraid to actually do the work. And I was sitting down with a lady in a group on Friday, and she asked the same question: shouldn't it be all lives? And before I can even say something, one of her friends had already spoken. So if, like, let's say she would have asked that question to him before, she would have already known like the answer to that. And he gave a very, very accurate answer. And I didn't even have to speak on it. So there are conversations that happen around that as well inside of white communities, but we need those conversations to be asked more frequently. And then also one thing that comes to mind when we talk about all lives matter and Black lives matter is equality, which I don't believe exists. I don't think that there's one person on this earth who treats everyone the same, because that is, to me, unrealistic for one, because between two people, no one needs the same attention. No one needs the same conversation. No one needs the same type of love. We're all different for a reason, and treating everyone the same is an injustice to ourselves and everybody else. We have to treat people just what I believe the way people should be treated. And you treat people with compassion, you treat people with love, and you treat them with respect. And I think that's what we need to get to. Stop using equality as a rebuttal or a deflection as well.
We saw a lot of that happen with the referendum discussion in the last few years, and that was the most aggravating thing, was that equity and equality, those two words, were being used as buzzwords, and saying that that the Chaska school system is trying to put white kids down, and just kind of ridiculous things. Honestly, Dante, do you want to touch more on that, on kind of what happened?
First of all, yeah, it was someone called equity un-American, and that was one of the most upsetting things I'd ever heard. And you can tell by that response that that person has no idea about equity and what it's supposed to mean and what it's supposed to do. But you also know that that person is nowhere near treating people the same way. Because to me, saying that it's un-American means that my kids don't deserve whatever your kids have. And that referendum, let me say this, we had problems last year with the high school, with the district, with the school board, and we were very vocal about it. I'm still vocal if I have a problem with something that they're not doing, because I'm on the Equity Advisory Council and also the Parent Advisory Council at the high school. So when people say things like it's un-American, one thing that I've always told people is my integrity means everything to me. And if I ever see anything, or if I'm a part of anything that jeopardizes that, I will remove myself, my kids, and my family from it. And we would not deal with it or be a part of it. A lot around the referendum was race-based. It was. And I don't know what type of mind frame that someone would have to believe that there's a community of people that will let white kids feel shamed or apologize for being white. That's not, there's nothing close to what we were trying to do and what we are trying to teach, well, the schools. I just say that because I'll be on the school board this November. I'll be starting my place on the school board and helping out there. But even with working closely with the principal at Chaska High School and on the Equity Advisory Council, you know, there was nothing that said that we would uphold Black kids and then start to treat white kids wrong. First of all, that's what we're trying to change. We're trying to get everyone to see all the kids at the same level, that they can achieve the same things, but we have to be very specific in how we give them those things because all kids are different. So we need to give them and work with them in areas that they need it in the ways that they need it. We can't treat everyone the same and give them the same instruction as we give a super advanced kid. It wouldn't work like that, and we wouldn't be doing our kids any favors. I hope the referendum comes back around because our kids does not deserve to lose those teachers that they absolutely love, and we don't deserve to have a number of teachers lose their jobs because we couldn't get a referendum passed. So I hope that referendum comes back around, and I will do my part to advocate even more for it, to get that referendum to pass in the cities where we had trouble with getting the first question passed, the first and second questions passed, because we absolutely need it and we need our community to grow. But people will not want to move here when they see that teachers are being fired and the learning is being compromised.
Shenika, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just a little bit to what Dante was saying. Yeah, I think it's going to be really sad if we do have to lose a lot of the teachers that we do have at Chaska. I believe that Chaska High School has some of the greatest teachers that we can think that that you could ask for within our community. Teachers who look out for our students and who have gone an extra mile. So I do think that just within the referendum, all of that was really, really sad. And that's kind of something that triggered me to start attending a lot of the school board meetings, just to really, have more of an influence to what's going on, and to just be able to hear, and be around the people who are making those decisions.
Yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I absolutely love the new superintendent. Not because she's Black. I mean, I'll be honest and say that that's a bonus. I would be lying if I said that I didn't look at that at all, but it didn't help me to make my decision on if she was the best fit or not. She spoke on a few things that I absolutely adore and believe. Community. I love community. And she talked a lot about getting out there and speaking with the community. And she also touched on letting teachers have their voice, asking those teachers what needs to be done, what's working, what's not working, and then also asking the students. I think as a school board that's the very three areas that we need to work on. The communication with the community. Absolutely. We need to communicate. We need better communication with the community. And then teachers, three things that I wanted to work on for my school board campaign. The number one thing was giving teachers their voices back, because I have had conversations with people, and I know that some teachers are afraid to speak up because of the consequences that comes with them using their voice, but they absolutely can be more beneficial to the schools, the school district, the school board than any other admin or staff possible, because they have much more close relationships with the students than anyone else. And then another thing was giving students a voice. We have to let students feel like they're being heard across the board. They are the ones who will tell us what's working, what's not. And we know kids will not sugarcoat anything. They will give you 100% real truth, and you may not like it, but we have to be able to see their perspective in order to be successful. And then rebuilding the trust with the community. And those were my three things: giving teachers their voices back, letting the students feel like they have a voice and using their voices, and regrowing the relationship with the community. And Lisa touched on a lot of those, and I absolutely loved it. And that's why I like her.
Good. Yeah, we're really excited to see what she can do. I'm pumped about her too. So we're almost running out of time here. There was a comment that said, raise the education budget and lower the police budget. Well, part of my platform is fully funding public education, so we don't have to do referendums and have school boards go beg voters for money. So that's part of the platform. So the thing I want to end on, I like to be a little bit forward looking. And just so you guys know too, our campaign is going to post a bunch of kind of allyship and educational materials to facilitate this conversation even more. Just got another comment here. I hope the referendum comes around again too. I was very disappointed in the no influence we had in our community prior to the vote and the effect it ended up having. I moved here specifically for ISD 112 and we need all the support we can get. And Dante, at a school board meeting, you said this was done by a bunch of people that came into our house and messed it up and now left, and we have to pick it up. So, yeah. So, okay, last question is, what is the ideal Carver County look like to you? What does the ideal Carver County look like to you? We'll start with Dante and then we'll go to Shenika.
The ideal Carver County is, to me, it's just community unity. It's us looking out for each other. It's us being good neighbors to each other. It's us holding our kids accountable and each other accountable. It's just us being the way neighbors and community should be, and looking out for each other, having each other's backs, and not a lot of what goes on inside of conversations on Facebook or anything. We need to let each other know that we are absolutely here with each other, and this is our community, not just one of us.
All right.
For me, I would say an ideal Carver County to me looks like a community where race, sexual orientation, and our beliefs are not judged, but they are all considered and accepted. And like Dante said, community unity. We're all in this together. A community that really just looks out for each other in order to build. That would be what an ideal Carver County looks like to me.
Yeah, that sounds great to me. I will do whatever I can to make that happen. So we're at time. I want to thank everyone on Facebook and both of you guys for joining us today. Huge thank you to both of you for being here. And if anyone has further questions, just get in touch with us through email, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, website, whatever, for any of us, and I can connect you guys too. So last thing, this campaign has never been about me. It's always been about us, right? It's about doing something to better the lives of those living in Carver County and in our great state. And that means all of us. George Floyd was not the first Black person to be murdered by a white police officer, and unfortunately, he may not be the last. But the time is now, in fact, overdue for the Minnesota State Senate to do something. So I plan to do something by creating this space for this conversation to continue, and by supporting members of the People of Color and Indigenous Caucus and their initiatives, and supporting initiatives brought forth by the leaders and the experts in this community. So I hope that each and every one of you watching is ready to stand behind our neighbors and do something to make this world a better place for them. So we'll be posting some helpful, action items and things on our campaign social media. Please check those out. If you have further questions, let me know. And we will see you same time next week. So stay safe and take care, everyone.